So hey, welcome to Changing Perspectives. You're here with myself, Tony V, and if this is your first time seeing Changing Perspectives, I have a special treat for you today, especially if you're wanting to understand a little bit more about conspiracy theories. Now, they've been in the news a lot lately because Brian Rose obviously interviewed David Icke, the probably the best known name in conspiracy theories today. And what I thought I would do is take apart conspiracy theories so that you could see them for what they sort of really are. Now, my gambit is not to make anything right or anything wrong, and that'll become apparent while we go through it. My outcome from sharing about conspiracy theories is for everyone to understand in a wider way where they come from, why they are what they are, and how do we decide whether they work for us. So yeah, David Icke, look, would I say I'm a fan? Not really. I did subscribe to one of his programs a few years back, so I know of him, I know of his stuff. I'm not right in there, so it's not necessarily just about David Icke, it's about conspiracy theories in general. But look, David has been in this arena since the time he left being a television presenter. So it's 2 decades, definitely, possibly even 3. This man has studied intricately this stuff. So I'm not out to make him wrong. What I'm out to do is to share that there are more than one perspective. So in conspiracy theories, we're tending to look at something that maybe has been framed up in a certain way, but from the conspiracy theorist viewpoint, it gets looked at in a very specific way. And for the most part, what happens is you're either agreeing with it, in other words, you're in, or you're not agreeing with it and you're an out. Yeah. So this begs a very, very big point about what's the truth here? What's really going on? Well, it's much bigger than a in or an out, or a right or a wrong, and that's what I'm planning to share with you today. And also then you can make your own decisions about what you believe about conspiracy theories going through, having found some new information about how we as humans operate individually, but also collectively, either in small groups or larger groups, or globally, should we say. So where should I start? Well, I think I should start by explaining that actually, in fact, I'm going to use one of my favourite analogies, which is, and it sort of starts like this. Why do horses wear blinkers? Okay, why do horses wear blinkers? So let's just imagine a horse running down the track, and they put blinkers on him. Why do they do that? It's basically to stop him seeing what's on the outside of the blinkers, to stop him freaking or being fearful or distracted by what's on the outside of the blinkers. In which case he gets very focused on where he's going, and obviously, it's just got that one thing. So it's got a very narrow focal view, and that's where he's going. Yeah. So I want you to just imagine for a moment that each of us individually are at some level, technically speaking, wearing a form of blinkers. So, and people could have blinkers that are very, very tight, so they've got a very narrow field of vision, and then will be, deleting what's on the outside. Or as we become more expanded, more aware is one of my favourite words. Some people would use the word conscious. We become more aware because our field of vision is larger. So somebody with a very closed view of vision will focus on what they see and tend to think that that's all there is, because it's what they see. So they measure what they see based on how tight their blinkers are. And as you can imagine, as your blinkers move away, you see more, so you have a different perspective of everything. And imagine removing the blinkers completely, you're definitely going to have a completely different view of life, how it operates, and all of that sort of stuff. So let's just imagine, also before I go forward, let's just imagine that our blinkers are like, they sort of breathe. So they're what I call situational. So depending on what the situation you're either talking about, looking at, considering, then your blinkers are sort of like, they've got a life to them, yeah? Now, you can't expand too quickly. So wherever they are is wherever they are. For them to go beyond where they are, you have to have, what some people would call an aha moment. Some people have to go, we'll call that a breakthrough, for example. Some people would see that maybe as a light bulb moment. What I would call it in reality terms would be that it's a realization. It's like a spike in your consciousness. And it could potentially only happen for a matter of a second or two, So it could be that you're here, with your blinkers on. This is how you perceive life. You have like a realization and then it goes back. But it won't ever go back quite as tight as it was before, unless there's a situation where there's an emergency where it needs to close down completely. So just think of it in that context. Now, if there were specific positions for these blinkers where most of humanity live, then I would say there are 4 key positions. And within those positions there'll be multitude of miniature positions, yeah? But let's just break it into simple chunks. We've got position 1, which is very closed, so the blinkers are on very tight. Then we'd have position 2, a little bit more open, position 3, very open, and position 4 is pretty much no blinkers at all. Let's just take those 4 positions and let's look at conspiracy theories through those 4 positionalities. So let's take position 1. Now, if you're a human who's got your blinkers on very tight, there's a few key distinctions of how you operate. And how you operate is based often, commonly around the way you think and the way that thinking produces a chemical reaction inside of your body. So maybe that's news to you, but all thinking creates a chemical hormonal reaction on the inner world of your body, yeah? And we commonly call those emotions, yeah? So each thought creates, in a millisecond, some sort of emotionality. You'll be experiencing some sort of emotion this very second, right now. And that will be based on the way you're thinking. So look, as people are watching this, they're all thinking slightly different things, and so they've got their own emotionality going on. Now, those emotions are what then drives our behaviour. Yeah? So that's a very powerful thing to just consider for a moment. So wherever your blinkers are, that creates a certain style of thinking, that creates a certain emotional response, which creates a behavioural response. Yeah? Now, for the people whose blinkers are on very tight, and this represents, it depends where you get your stats from, but look, there is some studies done on this, and we're talking around 85%ish of people, that sort of number, would have their blinkers on very tight. So that means their perception of the world is only what they see in their field of vision. That means, technically speaking, they are deleting everything that they don't see. Now that is incredible, isn't it? 85% of people are seeing life quite narrow. So, look, I've done many talked to thousands of people, often with my amazing wife, Icke V. And some of my favourite questions help us understand which of these positions we fall into. So let's deal with let me ask you a few questions, and then you just have to go inside and answer the question from a place of truth. What's true about me? Look, you don't have to share it with anybody else. It could just be a moment of realisation for you. It could be a chance to go, wow, never thought of it like that before. So, let me just ask you a few questions. So, one of my favourites is, when I'm with an audience, is put your hand up if you like being blamed. Well, how many people do you think actually rush to put their hand up going, yes, I like to be blamed? Well, I can tell you the score. Thousands and thousands of people have asked that question too. And I get the odd person go, well, I sort of mind being blamed, but that's not the question. The question is, do you like being blamed? And so the answer is no one ever puts their hand up. So that's quite interesting really, isn't it? That we don't, as humans, like to be blamed. okay? Now, the challenge is, or my next question is always, but what's the truth? If something's not going well in your world, do you at any point blame other people? Well, there's always a dull silence then, because there's a sort of a realisation that, yeah, you see, and also what happens is if somebody blames you, it's like from this positionality here, what we tend to do is two things. Firstly, we tend to defend ourselves because we're feeling blamed feels like being threatened, yeah? So first thing we're going to do is have a shield. I call it a shield of defensiveness. So we sort of just defend ourselves, yeah? And then we have this sword. It's a sword of justification. In other words, why this is not my fault, or why I've acted the way I have, or whatever it is. But we defend and justify. And generally speaking, when we defend and justify, we are deflecting the blame away from ourselves. And that means we're deflecting it very commonly back to the very person that has blamed us. Now, just think about it for a moment. If nobody's got their hand up liking the idea of being blamed, when you defend and justify, technically we're blaming them back. How much do they want to be blamed? Well, they're just doing their human thing, which is they don't want to be blamed either. So they do the defence and justify. And this is the basis of disconnection between humans. Now these disconnections can happen at various levels, yeah? So you could be, say, disconnected from your parents. That's quite common. You could be potentially disconnected from your partner, your life partner, your wife, your husband, that sort of thing. Could be that you're disconnected from your children. Could be your friends, your workmates, whatever. Situation has happened and suddenly you've gone into a defend and justify because you're feeling blamed, but technically we're blaming them back. Now, on a larger scale, just think about it. If you fall out with your neighbour, suddenly we're defending and justifying, they're defending and justifying. That's a sort of like an argument outside of the family or workplace, yeah? Now, that can, of course, go into bigger things. So if you chunk it up, as we sometimes call it, then it could well be that two countries fall out. Yeah, two countries fall out, and suddenly you've got a war. It's the same. One side saying one thing, the other side saying something else. Nobody wants to be wrong. So before we know it, we're killing each other. Look, this happens even in religion. It's like crazy that this is how we operate when we're operating like this, because there's this part of us that does not want to be wrong. Effectively, it doesn't want to be blamed, but really it doesn't want to be wrong. And this part of us is known as your egoic self. So it's not, I always say to people, look, there's two of you in there. You might not know it, but there's two of you in there. And one of you is actually what I call your representative. It's your egoic self. And the other one is actually like the real you, yeah? So, let me give you some more examples. So blame is very big in this world, very big in this sort of closed, blinkered world, yeah? So let's think of some other words. I've got 5 keywords which I always ask the audience. So, for example, do you know anyone right now who would be, for example, worrying about something? Well, when I ask an audience that, they sort of don't put their hands up, but there's a sort of a bit of a snigger goes on because, then I ask if they know that person well. Well, of course, the answer is that, huge numbers of people worry. I mean, I even prophesied and asked the question, look, let's face it, there's not far short of 8 billion people living on the planet. Now, a percentage of them, about a third of them, are asleep at any one time. So let's just say 4.5, 5 million people are awake and the others are asleep, yeah? How many of those that are awake do you reckon might be worrying about something right now? So see, worry is an emotion based around a certain thinking. And when you worry about something, you behave in a certain way. Make sense? Now, let's think also of my second word. So my second word would be, do you know anyone that's ever been anxious about anything? Well, again, I then ask the question, how many people on the planet do you reckon might be anxious about something right now? My next word would be frustrated. How many people do you reckon might be frustrated about something right now? Or do you know anybody that's ever been angry about anything? Well, how many angry people do you reckon there are in the planet right now? And my final one's always, the state of depression. How many people do you think might be, depressed right now? Well, the numbers for people that are on antidepressants, the costs to the National Health Service, unbelievable amounts of people that live in a place of depression. And of course their field of vision is very tight, very, very, very tight. So I then ask a question. So who here, likes to be controlled? Well, no one again puts their hand up. So look, the truth is, if you don't like being controlled, you just have to ask yourself, but am I trying to control other people in any way, shape or form? And the truth is, we're all trying to control other people. And that is what the egoic way of life is. So, there are some other what I might call more emotionally based words, which the very closed down energies tend to utilise. Now, if you go to the very bottom of the pile, that's the very closed people. The sort of words that they would use, well, one of them would be blame, definitely. Blame, the blame game is just so big, in humanity, it's unbelievable. Shame, humiliation, these are also very low energy words. Guilt, another unbelievably low energy word. So if somebody is in the blame game, in other words, they're blaming other people for something that is happening that they don't see as their fault. That's just an interesting thing. So as we think, bringing it back to conspiracy theories, as you listen to someone like David Icke, does he blame other people for things that are happening to his experience and obviously the collective experience of others? Does he blame others for doing things? The answer is absolutely yes. It's at the core of conspiracy theories that blame is very, very there. It's all there. You are lying to us. Yeah. So that's a behavioural response to an emotional stance. Yeah. Now, another thing that happens right deep down in the closed, blinkered world is judgment. Yeah. So, like, we judge others like you can't believe. Obviously people talk about don't judge other people, but it's something we do en masse. So of course, when you take a positionality of the conspiracy theorists, you are definitely judging, you're definitely blaming. So you're coming from a very low energy. And of course, the thing that you're accusing the people that are conspiring against you is, pretty huge. So you could sort of say, look, there is an argument that says, you may have heard this, that like energy attracts like energy. So if you are in that energy personally, then you are most likely to see somebody doing something and you are going to put that filter, as we call it, you're going to see it through the blinkers. We're not going to see the rider view, we're just going to see the blinkered view. So that's sort of one way to start unravelling conspiracies. And you're going, right, okay. So as I listen to some of the conspiracy theories, being out of judgment, just become the observer. Be the observer of the whole conspiracy theory thing and just ask ourselves, so where are these people hanging out? What do they talk about? What language do they use? How do they portray their position? Because when you're very, very closed, one of the things you're going to notice, well, there's two key things that you'll notice. Firstly, the conversation, the talk will be about somebody else, a situation, a circumstance. Often in conspiracy theories, you'll hear the word they, them, the government, the baddies, these people. And sometimes someone like David will name people, the Zionists, for example. Yeah. And so what we're doing is we're saying these people are doing this thing to us. Now, that puts you in the position of the victim of them. That is the basis of conspiracy theories. The thing is that these people are doing something to us that's making us, our world not good. Yeah. So let me not make this right or wrong. Let me just explain that this is a way to just learn about and observe. Firstly, I always say about ourselves, but then about how the game of life, the bigger game of life, is played. So, if we are ultimately a victim of the conspiracy people, the people that are conspiring against us, then unfortunately that puts us in a very weak position. They will be in a strong position, we will be in a weakened position. And the reason we're in a weakened position is that when you're the victim, you lack also any sort of power. Okay, you can fight a bit, but you can fight dirty. You can throw your weight around a bit, but overall you don't have the power in you to overcome. Victims, generally speaking, you would say, are powerless. That is why, we try to get a group of people together. Anybody that's like in the anti-camp. If you're in the anti-camp, it's like, okay, let us work collectively to try to overcome these people conspiring against us. It's a common strategy that's used. Look, let's face it, the trade unions have used this since Victorian times, since they came into fruition. We collectively will withdraw our labour because we are the victims of your behaviour. Now, look, I'm not making any of that right or wrong. We're just observing how the game is played, yeah? So, if this is the lowest positionality, and that for me is primarily, if you think about it, is there any anger in the conspiracy world? Is there any hatred, for example, in the lower energy fields between these two sides? And the answer is almost always yes. Almost always yes. So we are assuming these people are doing something to us. We're taking the place of the victim. We are then in this lower energy field ourselves, and we tend to feel powerless to do anything about it. So we just, moan, complain, fight, argue, whatever we do. But basically we're blaming them of doing this stuff to us. And so one of the things that you'll notice about this position is that people that take this position are not taking any responsibility for their thinking, their emotionality, or in fact their behaviour. So my question always is, are you actually in control of your emotionality and then your behaviour? Or are your emotions, does your thinking set off your emotions and then you react in a certain way where actually, technically speaking, you are not in control of you? That's an interesting question, yeah? Now, there was some great work done, probably 100 years ago by a lady called Florence Scovel Shinn. She wrote a great book called The Game of Life. And the essence of this work that she created is about us recognising that we have a part to play in this game. And actually, whatever we bring to the party, thinking, emotionally and behaviourally, we are to a degree part of the problem. Now, she used an example which I absolutely love, which is that if you put a kettle on a stove and put cold water in it, keep giving it heat, eventually that water will come to the boil. And out of the spout of the kettle will spout masses of steam. Now, if you are to put your hand in front of that steam, I guess at school you would have learnt that steam is actually hotter than boiling water. So the effect of that is that you're going to get burnt. So we wouldn't recommend that you do that. But actually just think about that for the moment. What she says, or said, over 100 years ago, or thereabouts, is she said, there is a power in this steam. But for most people, that steam is out of control. So her analogy really is that if you contain that steam, as they did in Victorian times, that steam element, although dangerous when not under control, once controlled is unbelievably powerful. So in a sense, once they contain the steam, they were able to create the whole industrial revolution was based around steam. But what they did is took something that was very dangerous, controlled it, and then put it to use. Now, her analogy with us humans is that our thinking and our emotions and our behaviour, for the people that have got very narrow vision, have not effectively got their unconscious mind, their thinking part of them, they've got that completely out of control. It is out of control, so it's dangerous. It's like the steam. And to be honest, if you want to throw mud at people, then you know what's the saying, they're going to throw it back at you. So from a conspiracy theorist viewpoint, you're taking a positionality which massively makes the other person wrong, and so if you throw things at them, they're going to throw them back. Now, could it be the truth is that for a vast majority of people, our thinking is out of control, so our emotions and behaviour are out of control, so actually we're not operating in a way that would help us see what's happening or how the game is really being played in a bigger, more expanded way. And the only way we can do that is to expand our own understanding, our own experience of the situation. And to do that, you have to be open to see things through different eyes. So, the analogy I'll use here is if we were to expand our awareness, open our blinkers a bit, it would be a little bit like playing a game of football. So, imagine you're in the game. You know, there's 22 players on the field. You're one of the players, whatever position you play, you are going to experience the game as it's played around you. And that experience has you what I call in the game. Now, imagine for a moment you're substituted. You know, you're taken off the field, and actually what you do is you go and sit in the dugout and somebody else comes on. Now, from the dugout, does the game actually look different? Well, yes, of course it does. Instead of being in it, with it being played around you, you're now at the side of the game, seeing the game being played. So you have a different perspective. So remember, this whole program's called Changing Perspectives. So if you want to change your perspective, you have to move your positionality. So in a football game, you could be, substituted. Now, imagine that you got into a bit of a punch-up, you've seen this happen in a game, whilst you're the substitute, and the ref comes over and gives you a red card and he sends you to the stand. So now you've got to go up the stand. So let's just say you have to sit halfway up the stand. Normally this happens to a manager, to be fair. If you're a player, you have to go into the change room where you're definitely going to get a different perspective because you're not going to see the game at all. If you're the manager, you're forced to go to the stand. So from the stand, let's just go, the third position is halfway up the stand. You've now got a much wider view of the whole game. So your perception of the game now changes again. Now it could be that you went right to the back of the stand, the very back seat, the back row. Then again, now we're looking more even down on the game. So I want you to just understand that these are just different positionalities. And these are, let's say, the 4 different positions of the way that you can wear the blinkers. Yeah. So if we've got the victim here in blinker position number 1, it's happening to me, all of that stuff we've talked about. If we go to position 2, we're now technically looking at the game from a different position. What happens is that we have our thinking patterns are different. Now, in position 1, what we're doing, and it's funny that David Icke uses this, he talks about people being reptiles, but actually the irony is that your brain is made up of different parts, and this sort of back part of your brain, this sort of what's known as the brain stem, is actually also known as the reptilian brain. Yeah? And this part of your brain is very reactive. So this is the part of the brain that's very reactive when we're in this very closed position. Something happens outside of us, we think about it, respond emotionally, respond behaviourally, all in a flash of a second. It's that part of our brain, the ancient part of our brain as it's sometimes called. This reactive part that then, the other person or the other people experience of you. Yeah. Now, as we change our perception, we start to use our brain very differently. And when we use this part of our brain, the frontal lobes of our brain, this part is really where we do a different type of thinking. So this part uses reactive thinking, this part is more considered. It's trying to work things out. Now, to move from this part of the brain to this part of the brain is quite a big jump. You know, we're going from here to here, okay? And the people that are here see life completely differently because their perception's different, because they're using a different part of themselves. Now, in terms of percentage of the population that live in this part of their brain, this part, their awareness is here, then these people in numbers, let's just go for about 10%. 85% here, thinking this is all there is, this is what's going on, this is how I see it, to seeing it here going, wow, okay, this is how it works. Let me think about that. How can we fix this? 85% like this, 10% like this. Interesting, yeah? Now, the difference between jumping from here to here is firstly, you and you alone are the only one that can make the jump from here to here. Yeah, and what you have to do is, first of all, the very first step is to become aware you're here. Now, my thing with the conspiracy theorists is that most of them are like this. They're very closed thinking, and they're very reactive thinking. They're very blamey of others. They take the position of the victim. This has been done to us. Yeah, so if somebody who was a conspiracy theorist was able to, you know, open their experience and think about it a little bit more, because what happens when you start to think about it from a different perception, you're using different part of your brain and you see things differently, then literally everything changes. Everything changes. So yeah, that will be what I would encourage you to go, right, okay, what do I need to do if I am deep in conspiracy theory? What do I need to do to see this in a new, more empowered way, rather than, you know, be in the melee, be in the game? And there's a few things that you need to consider. The first thing is to move from here to here takes one word in my book, because to physically move from this to that takes quite a lot of courage. Because remember, from this position we're doing everything we can not to be wrong. We don't want to be blamed in any way. So to move from, you know, that to going, well, maybe I could start to accept some responsibility would be a good word. I wouldn't say these people are necessarily, but they're definitely going to think about it differently. These people also, there's a big shift, a big shift. Not only does it take courage to look at your life differently, to what I call really, it's like an acceptance that I have taken this positionality and now I'm choosing to take a different positionality, develop this part of me so that I see things differently. It not only takes some courage, but it takes acceptance that we have lived our life like this. We've been in the 85%, we've lived like that, and now maybe it would be interesting, rather than, you know, living like that, to see if I could see this differently. And that's why I love, you know, changing your perspective. If you change your perspective, everything changes. So from this position, a conspiracy theorist looks very, very, very different. Because what sort of happens, one big distinction for the difference between the two positions is that, again, this closed position, the consciousness of that person is primarily on themselves. It's primarily what we call a survival environment that we are creating. Whereas when we open out, what we start to do is we start to consider others before we consider ourselves. So that's why it takes some courage, because it's such a big shift from having your focus on yourself to having your focus on others. This is why it takes some courage to accept that actually the way I have been looking at that, maybe there's a different way to look at it, and then you study a little bit about how to see things differently. But from this position, then everything looks different. So let me give you a couple of different words that will perhaps assist you. Firstly, this position is much more optimistic. This position's much more pessimistic. This position's more cynical. This position's definitely more open to think about it, talk about it, understand the other person's point of view. It's quite a different position. And remember, 10% of people live like this. So just think about, so who do I know that lives more like this, and who do I know that lives more where their focus and attention is on other people? Then they're more optimistic, they're more trusting is a great word. They tend to be people that have, they're quite courageous, more outgoing, a little bit more extrovert than introvert, should we say, although that's not always the case, but it is a factor to take into consideration. So from this position, of course, the victimhood doesn't absolutely dissipate, but it definitely diminishes. Because our thinking is about we start to think about more the greater good, other people than ourselves. So it's like we've got more of a herdy mentality, like you heard David Cameron, and it's a common saying nowadays, look, we're all in this together, whereas this person, we're definitely in it on our own, and we're fighting for our position, and we might fight in a little family group or but look, even when it's a country, when their consciousness is closed, we'll all fight together. They're the baddies, we're the goodies, they're wrong, we're right, so now we have to kill them, right, let's beat them, and then we will be the victors. So that all comes from this sort of lower consciousness. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't countries that pick on countries like this, can pick on countries like this, and then these people will fight back. They have to protect themselves. So because they're capable of doing all of this, remember they're breathing, if they're attacked by this, then they will go for this. I remember Churchill's very first gambit in the First World War, Second World War, I can't remember now whether it was the first or second, I think it was the Second World War. Is that we obviously France was taken over by the Nazis, and Churchill was faced with shooting up the French Navy, and he actually did give an order where we sunk the French ships, who were technically our allies, and over 1,000 French soldiers died because the Royal Navy bombarded them, because they didn't want the ships to get used against us by the Nazis. So that sort of thing, that will be somebody with a, he's thought about it, he's got the only thing we can do is we've got to fight these people from where they come from. So I always remember Jack Bauer saying that. There was a court trying to think about something at one point, Jack Bauer from 24, and he's going, look, you don't understand. If you want to sort these people out, these very baddie people, we need to fight dirty, we need to fight the same way they fight. This will never beat these people. So that's where you will find, this breathing goes on, breathing of consciousness, where sometimes somebody with a wider consciousness and takes on somebody with a lower consciousness and will fight them in their same way. So that's sort of position 2, which is the thinker. Now, if we go halfway up the stand, suddenly we're all looking at the game very, very differently. And two amazing things happen when you get to this position. So we've gone from here to here, now we're going to here. From this position, the whole of life once again starts to look different. And there are two key elements, as I say, that really change. One of them is that duality, that's where we see things as good or bad, right or wrong. So just take the conspiracy theorist, he's definitely saying, I'm right and this is wrong. So we've got duality. Duality is whenever everything splits into two. And the egoic self, this sort of lower energy us, it absolutely lives and dies by duality. Black and white, good or bad, right or wrong, war or peace. It's all opposites. Everything works in opposites. Now, when we get to here, we get to a point where this dualistic way of looking at things starts to dissipate. And that's because we use a different part of our brain again. There's this part of our brain right in the centre of our brain which absolutely, once that's functional, or it starts to open up. I always say it's a little bit like a Pac-Man. It opens up and it starts to see things, and you start to, experience life, your life and the life of everything around you completely differently. And so with duality gone, you start to go, well, you start to really be the observer in the game. Now, only about 5% max of people on the planet live in this position, okay? So it's 5% here, 10% here, 85% there, yeah? And your conspiracy theories do not live up here, they live right down here because of the way they operate, yeah? It's easy to see when you take on this model. So, as you look at it from here, then there is no duality. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. There is no black or white. One of my favourite sayings will be, "It is what it is." Yeah, it's all just happening. It's an experience that's happening, and this experience is meant to happen. Yeah, so we're meant to have this experience. So as you sit halfway up the stage, you wouldn't make someone like David right or wrong. You just go, look, he's having an experience, as are all of his followers, as are the people over here that are the conspirators. They are the opposites if you think about it. They're, David's saying he's the goodie, they're the baddie, technically. You can see its duality. These people are judging these people, and they're making them people wrong. We've got that whole don't want to be wrong, so they, lob mud at each other. Yeah? Whereas from up here, when this central part of your brain starts to operate, then what happens is literally duality dissipates. And there is nothing like that. That doesn't exist anymore. So that's why, look, only a few percentage of people are going to understand that because they've not got there, not seen life through that guise. And also what happens at that same particular point is that what we call, or is known as cause and effect, that also dissipates. So down here we've got cause and effect, and we've got it in the wrong way round. So it's like, you are doing this to me, I am the victim, you are the cause of this, I am at the effect of you. That's how cause and effect works. Now once we get to up here, then cause and effect dissipates, and what happens is we take responsibility, all responsibility for what we experience. And of course we start to be in control of our thinking, so this is quite rare. We're in control of our thoughts. That means we're in control of our emotionality, and that means we're in control of our behaviour. So from this position we are able to go, basically somebody from this positionality would go, so the experience I'm having of the world is actually me creating it. So I create my experience. So I live at cause. So the experience I experience, I cause it, I create it. It's not happening to me. I'm not the victim of it. I am creating it with my thinking, with my emotionality, with my behaviour. So that's why this is such a big switch, and not many people, as I say, are able to do that. And from this position, of course, conspiracy theory, it doesn't really exist. It will be, look, this is the journey of the human, okay? This is the journey of the collective human. So millions of people living, the 85%, they're living here, and their way they think and the way they act and the way they co-create the experience for themselves is what it is. It needs for them to wake up to the fact that there is a different perception. They need somebody in the opposite camp to do something so they can have the realization that they are the victims and that they don't want to be the victims. In fact, they've got no power. So to become empowered, they don't need to strap on more muscles so they can throw bombs at these people. What they need to do is to diffuse these people. The easiest way to diffuse them is actually to expand your consciousness of them, and their power will dissipate. So instead of being like, I remember living in Glastonbury for a couple of years, and these people knocked on my door once, and they said, "Are you coming on the march? Are you coming on the march on Saturday?" I'm going, "No. What march?" And they go, "Well, it's about Hinckley Power Station. We have to stop the power station. They're building a new power station there, and we are all going to march with banners and we're going to stop it. I'm going, I don't do that, you know, because I'm not anti. I believe that, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, there aren't occasions where people have gathered together and got change to happen, but that change has always come, generally speaking, at quite a big cost. The better change, the more simple change, is not to gather together as a bunch of antis to fight this, but to become more self-aware, to become more self-centered. If a bunch of people were able to do that in enough numbers, change will happen in a very, very, very different way. So, look, I'm going to leave it there. I trust I haven't made David Icke and Brian Rose wrong in it anyway. I wanted to make this to show you that it's not about they're right and these people are wrong, or they're doing any of this, but there is a perception that you may wish to take on board that leads you on a personal journey of self-discovery about the way you as an individual operate. Now, if enough people were to go on that journey, then trust me, everything would change. Everything would start to change dramatically. Because the way that we live now, with 80% of people living like this, is giving us the experience we're getting. Now, if that's an experience that you don't want to have, the best way to change it is to expand your awareness, your consciousness, you know, remove your blinkers, lots of analogies here, move yourself halfway up the stand. You will see things from a different perspective, and from that different perspective you will start to be in control of you, and you will start to have a much better experience of life in general. So that's it from me, Tony V, debunking a bit of David Icke and conspiracy theories. Trust you got something from that. If indeed you did and you loved it, and please do hit the subscription button, because every time we make a new video you'll then get notified. You do have to hit the little bell thing as well. So yeah, if you've got something from it, you know, share it with your friends, tell your friends. If you've got any comments at all, pop them underneath. I'm all good with you, you know, disagreeing with me, that's all good. I'll do my best to explain the different positionalities. Remember, in my world, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. There is no good or bad. It's just you've got a perception from where you sit in this moment. And if you were to move your perception or change your perception, if you chose to, then suddenly you can see things very, very differently. And so I trust that's going to assist you in some way on your journey through life. So I hope to see you on another edition, shall we call it, or episode of Changing Perspectives. That's it from me, Tony V. Bye for now.